Welcome to the Karen Kenney Show.
Hey, you guys, welcome to the Karen Kenney Show. I'm so excited to be here with you today. And let's start off with a little question or two. So, let me ask you this. Have you ever said yes to something when like everything in your body was going like, no, no, I don't really want to do this. But out of guilt or shame or whatever weirdness is going on inside of you, you say yes and you do the thing. Okay. Or how about, do you ever like suck it up and stuff it down, like all your feelings in order to keep the peace or not make other people uncomfortable or to not seem like odd man out or whatever? Or do you ever just like continuously go above and beyond and you Cirque du Soleil yourself into every kind of position you contort yourself? You show up for things, you do everything for everybody else, you don't say no. You like basically exhaust yourself in service to other people, but you don't make your own needs a priority. Because if that's the case, you might be caught up in this self-abandoning kind of behaviors. And I am no stranger to this myself. And I wanted to talk to you about this, first of all, because I just think it's important. And I think these kinds of behaviors, and I say this kind of jokingly, but also I think there's an underlying thing to this. This is the kind of shit that leads us to an early grave, right? This is the kind of stuff that puts so much stress on ourselves when we self-abandon. And we're going to talk about this today because of a couple of things that happened. So you know me, I love to do a little story time. Story time. So two things happened that led me to wanting to talk about this today. And the first thing that happened is I saw a little story online. So I'm kind of fascinated. And I don't know if it's because my mother was adopted as a baby and she never knew her mother, she never knew who her father was. Her whole quote unquote, I would say real family, and we can argue about blood relatives versus whatever, but I mean her biological family, she didn't know them. And this has always kind of struck me in for several different reasons in several different ways, is it left a little ache in my heart for my mom. And I know on some level it it was distressing or bothered her too. We can get into that another time. But just for the point, I think there's a tender spot in my heart for that. So I love these shows when I see people getting reunited with their family members, especially when they wanted to find each other, right? Not like when it's awkward or weird and then it's like, ugh, but when people genuinely wanted to find their birth parents or their siblings. I love that. So it was a short little clip. It was like 3 minutes long. And I saw this story of a guy, and he's talking to the woman who runs the show, who like finds the people and helps people reconnect. And this one guy starts to find out that his mother is dead, that his father is dead. But he comes to find out he has four biological siblings that he didn't know anything about. And I assume that he was like the firstborn. I'm like, okay, he must have been the oldest, and maybe the mother or whoever gave him up for adoption or sent him away or whatever the thing was, because I didn't have all the details yet. But come to find out, here's the bottom line of this story. So not only does this guy find out that he had four siblings, but he finds out that he had an older brother, and they're all biological. They all have the same parents. So just think about what a trip this is. So he finds out that he has an older brother who's 10 years older than him. So apparently the mother and the father had one kid and decided to keep this child. But then he was the second born and he was given up. Okay, so this is all we know at this point. He's given up. And then he comes to find out he has two younger sisters. So imagine being this guy and finding out, okay, well, they chose to keep my older brother. They went on to have two younger siblings. Why did they like get rid of me? And so you're watching this story and you find out from the host that his siblings want to meet up with him. They want to get to know him. He's overcome with emotion. The whole thing, like I cry every time I watch these things, like bawling, right? Oh my God, crying over strangers, but that's my daily existence. So he ends up meeting with the siblings. And it comes to find out, and I'm sure he had so many questions about like, why me? And there's the whole story as to why, right? The father was in the army and he was gone a lot, but I guess the mother hid her pregnancy with him. So the older brother never even knew that the mother was pregnant. And supposedly, as the story goes, is she had the baby in a public restroom somewhere. And then she took him and she dropped him off. I don't know if it was at a fire station, but at a public place. So he is what you considered being a foundling. You are a baby that is given up anonymously. Nobody knows who your parents are. And he was taken in by whoever like ended up finding him or taking him into the fire department, whatever it was. So when he's meeting with the siblings, and the older brother says, I feel so guilty because I didn't know. And I'm thinking, oh man, you were 10 years old, man. Your mother could have just worn big dresses or hid her belly or what do you know, you know? And so this woman delivered this baby unbeknownst. And then the two youngest siblings, the two daughters, two young, his sisters didn't know about him. But when they're all talking about him, the older brother says, I feel really guilty. And one of the youngest sisters just starts to cry and she says, and when I found out that you were a foundling, she's like, it just broke my heart. And she started to cry. And I just kept thinking about this idea of being a foundling. There's something that is, I don't know, maybe I'll write a story about it someday, but it just really moved me, this concept of being a foundling. And that made me think, and we're going to talk about abandoning ourselves, but I want to set this up as to why it's on my heart and my mind. So the very same day, and this is how it works, right? My spiritual team always has, I always say they have a wicked funny sense of humor. So the same day, my sister sends me a video in like on Facebook in private messages, and all she writes is, maybe you are related to him with a question mark. And I'm like, oh my God, I already probably don't know where this is going. But the fact that she sends me this video on the same day that I'm crying about this guy being a foundling makes me laugh. So in this video, I wrote down the dialogue back and forth between these two younger brothers. So it's an older brother. I'd say he's probably about 12, and a younger brother, I'd say he's probably about like 9 or 10 or something. And the older brother's in the front seat and he's looking back at the younger brother. And the older brother says, we found you in a garbage can. And whether you're an older sibling or a younger sibling, you might be able to relate to this. But in this scenario, I am the youngest sibling, right? So he says, we found you in a garbage can, like dead serious. And the little boy in the back seat goes, I wasn't found in a garbage can. And then the boy in the front seat says, but you was adopted. And that's why you don't look like none of us. He says, somebody just left you on the front porch and mama just took you in. And the little kid in the back seat goes, And he goes, all right, just go ask. Right? This is what the older brother says. And I was just like, I was cracking up laughing. Although it wasn't that funny to me when I was a kid. But when I was a little kid, my sister used to say to me that I was found on the side of the road, that I was adopted, that my mother found me on the side of the road and they felt bad for me, so they took me in. Then she would tell me that the police were my real parents, that I didn't belong to this family. The police were my parents and they reached out to my mother and she felt bad for me, so she took me in. And while you're denying it as a little kid, some part of you is also like thinking like, but is it true? It can't be true, right? And the funny thing is that I have a biological sister, my sister Kim, we have the same parents, but then I have two half brothers. And we all have the same father, but we have different mothers, right? Except for my sister Kim and I. We have the same exact parents. But BJ and Chris, they have the same dad as me, but they have different mothers, right? And my sister, Chris, so it's like Kim, Chris, and BJ. They all have what we jokingly say is like these pumpkin heads. They have bigger heads. They have rounder heads than I do. And I have this picture one time of the four of us together. We were out watching my sweetie play. This was years and years and years ago because my brother BJ lives in Illinois and I like never see him. So he was up visiting or whatever. And we're all out at this bar, like watching my sweetie's gig. And there's a picture of the three of us. And literally, when you see this picture, you can just start singing that song from like Sesame Street or Electric Company. It's just like one of these things just doesn't belong here. One of these things just doesn't belong. Yeah, it's me. I look different than them because I have a lot of my mother's DNA, right? Like the adopted side of the family DNA. It's this whole funny thing. So I start to think about this though, about how My sister told me this story of me being abandoned as a child. I wasn't wanted by my original family, but that I was taken in out of sympathy or whatever. But this idea of abandonment, of being a foundling, like this has stayed with me like throughout my whole lifetime. And there have been so many times where I didn't feel like I belonged or I didn't feel like I fit in. And that's a story for another day. But I want to come back to this concept of abandoning because I think so many of us walk around with like this wound of feeling abandoned. And whether it's because your parents got divorced when you were a kid, or you were adopted, or you were in the foster care system, like literally abandoned, right? Physically abandoned or emotionally abandoned, like your parents were not emotionally intelligent and they didn't know how to hold you tenderly. They didn't know how to be compassionate. They didn't know how to see you and really care for you and love you in the way that you needed. There are ways that we are physically abandoned, emotionally abandoned, mentally abandoned, all of these things. Often because our earliest caregivers and caretakers did not know how to love us and care for us and nurture us and nourish us. But there's also a point where it comes where we stop feeling, right? It's not so much as important about what the other people did growing up. It's about the patterns that we keep perpetuating to ourselves as adults. And I know when we think about this concept of self-abandonment, it's like, well, what do you mean, KK? Like, I am with myself all the time. Like, how can I abandon myself? Like, I don't really get it. But the thing is that when we start to do things, let me give you an example. I'm going to give you a bunch of examples of how we don't trust ourselves. But one of the biggest ones is when we diminish or discount our own feelings because we think they don't really matter, because that's kind of the conditioning that we came up with, right? Especially I always say like little masshole kids, we like learn to suck it up and stuff it down, right? What we wanted, what we felt, our tender feelings, those parts of us that were sensitive in tender and needed more mercy and compassion. They were not nurtured and nourished, right? It was like, suck it up, stuff it down. This is just how it is. I'll give you something to cry about, stop your bellyache and all that stuff, right? Weren't allowed to feel our feelings. They were not welcome. Nobody was asking us to sit down and express ourselves and tell them what we thought and what we felt, right? Like that was not a big thing growing up, right? My generation, Gen X, but also just in certain cultures, right? In Lawrence, Mass, or Boston, wherever you grew up, right? I know a lot of East Coast kids have had this experience, especially Northeast Coast kids, and I think about that song by Noah Kahn where he says, like, please forgive me, I was born in little light or with little light, right? And I think about that. It's like, yeah, that Northeastern kind of coldness and toughness. There's a beauty to it. Don't get me wrong. There's a beauty to our resilience and our strength and our fortitude, our loyalty, these things. They were forged, right? But there's also something where the sensitivity gets lost and we get lost to ourselves and our own needs. We start to abandon them. So here's some concepts, right? We can abandon ourselves when we don't value ourselves. We can abandon ourselves when we don't know how to comfort ourselves, to support ourselves, to encourage ourselves. We can abandon ourselves when we make choices that aren't actually in our own best interest because we become people pleasers, because we want to serve other people, because other people's needs have become more important than our own. So here are some examples. I have a list here because I wanted to make sure. I like to make notes just, sometimes so I can be effective here because I never, ever, ever want to waste your time. And if you're listening to this, I want it to be helpful in some way. Okay. When you don't speak up for yourself, when you don't take a stand for yourself, when somebody is like saying things about you that aren't true, when somebody's being kind, when somebody is, just not making your needs a priority at all in a relationship. So when you don't ask for what you need, when you let other people take advantage of you and your kindness or your capacity, right? Like some of us are able to work long and hard hours. And so people will kind of just start to go like, oh, she'll do it. She doesn't mind, or they'll take care of it because they always do it because a pattern has been established, right? So when we let other people take advantage of us, when we don't enforce healthy boundaries, good boundaries, learning to say no when we don't ask for what we need. That not speaking up for ourselves is one of the ways that we can abandon ourselves. When we suppress our own feelings, when we like suck it up and stuff it down, when we don't allow ourselves to feel the uncomfortable feelings or the ones that we label bad, like anger or rage or whatever. I never want you to be inflicting that stuff on other people, right? But to be able to have a safe place to express our feelings when we push them away and we don't allow ourselves, when we deny ourselves to, as I say, taste the rainbow of your full emotional experience, right? When we start to do like the drinking and the drugging at extreme levels and stuff like that, when we start to alter our mood artificially because we don't know how to express ourselves or take care of ourselves, when we avoid feeling big feelings, all of these things are ways that we can abandon ourselves. When we don't acknowledge that our needs matter too. Now, I'm not saying you have to put yourself first all the time. There are just times in relationships where it's a give and take. But when you don't recognize that your needs matter, that they're valid, that you're allowed to have them, when you don't take good care of yourself, when you're constantly maybe feeling not just that, like you don't deserve it, that you don't feel like you are worthy of self-care and caring for yourself and putting your needs first. These are all signs sometimes of like maybe abandoning ourselves when we do things. So in the nest, we were just talking about the big three, our core values, and how important our values are. When we find ourselves start to agreeing to things or doing things that are not in alignment with our own values, when we do things to please other people, but end up kind of injuring ourselves, if it's going against your true beliefs and the things that matter to you, that's a form of self-abandonment. The people pleasing we know about, right? That's when we just like, we're always trying to like seek validation outside of ourselves, and we want to be good and we want the reward of them like giving us attention or whatever. It's like when you give up your own self interest like to please other people, that's a red flag. We want to look at that. Sometimes perfectionism is a way that we abandon ourselves because we don't allow ourselves to be human. We don't allow ourselves to have to have flaws, or we don't allow ourselves to sometimes have character defects. And when we have those character defects, of course, we want to work on them and stuff. But you do not have to be perfect. It's not realistic, and it sucks the joy out of life. And if we don't allow ourselves to feel worthy unless we're accomplishing certain things, right? That can be a way of self-abandoning. When you put I did an episode one time called Are You a High Bar Jumper? Where you don't ever let yourself see yourself for what you've actually already done or accomplished. When you set these really high expectations for yourself, where you can never actually meet your own level of expectation. So that's not soothing. When you're wicked hard on yourselves, when you're wicked self-critical, when you're highly over like judgmental, when you tear yourself down, when you say what's self-depreciating things to yourself constantly, like as a joke, when you say mean things to yourself, when you don't ever just acknowledge yourself and love yourself, and you abandon parts of yourself, right? Like we have these younger parts of ourselves that just want to know that we made it, that we're now in our 30s, 40s, 50s. We survived it. We're doing well. We have friends. We have people who love us. We have these younger parts of ourselves that have been burdened. They've been exiled, right? It's just like, you are not allowed to show up here. You and your old stories and your pain and your trauma and your suffering. We just like stuff it down into this corner until some illness, some therapy, or some coaching or mentoring, right, like happens, where we're allowed to let those exiled parts of ourselves have a voice. But up until that, we can really self-abandon a lot of different parts of ourselves, and we don't trust ourselves. That's another form of self-abandonment, when we overthink and we second guess everything and we ruminate and we let other people tell us how we should live our lives, and we ask them to make the decisions for us because we don't trust ourselves. When we give away our own power, and when we assume other people, everybody from your friends, your siblings, your parents, doctors, whoever, right? People outside of you, you give them the authority and you think that they know what's better for you than you do. That's a way that we self-abandon our own brilliance and our own intuition and stuff like that. And like sometimes we can hide parts of ourselves. We start to feel like, this is why I always say in the nest, like all parts of you are welcome here. You don't have to show up perfect. You don't have to show up as a know-it-all. You don't have to show up like not having any history or flaws. It's like all of your parts are welcome, right? And when we feel like that's not true, we will hide aspects of ourselves. And a lot of times, I just want you to hear this. Even though as adults we might still be grappling with this, a lot of this behavior starts in childhood. It starts when our parents, again, they didn't meet our emotional needs, our mental needs, our physical needs. We felt abandoned, and we learned at a young age that we didn't feel worthy, we didn't feel lovable. And so then our actions over time start to be a representation of the beliefs that we have. And this is how we kind of create identity and all this other stuff. Because we tend to repeat the things that we learned in childhood. This is why I often say that as a mentor and a coach, like, yeah, I work with adults, but really I'm just working with little kids in adult bodies because we're just basically repeatedly repeating the patterns. And sometimes those patterns turns out to be the relationships that we also choose, right? Because they're mimicking like what we knew when we were little kids. And as we get older, it's like we start to just do the things that other people did to us, but we just start doing it to ourselves. We take on that role. And it's a learned behavior. And this is wicked good news because anything that we learn, we can also unlearn because the brain has neuroplasticity and we can put like new neural networks in place through repetition, through kindness and compassion repeatedly over time, right? So all those times when we like make fun of ourselves or ridicule ourselves or put ourselves down or we become chameleons. I was a fantastic chameleon when I was younger. I could, like, again, Cirque du Soleil myself into whatever I needed to be in whatever situation. And I'm not saying that that sometimes isn't a skill set that is beneficial, right? But we don't want to abandon the truth of who we really are. And I'll often say, what you see is what you get with me. You might see me on stage. That's still me. Or you might see me on a podcast or doing something. I'm like, that's still me. It's just my personality is dialed up a little bit louder or bigger or whatever. But the core of it is still me. I'm not interested in Cirque du Soleil myself or being a chameleon anymore. I know that there are times like I talk about it like with swearing a lot, right? Like I'm not going to probably get in front of your grandmother and start dropping F-bombs all the time. I try to be respectful. I'm not an idiot. Hashtag evolved masshole. But if I'm just with like people and my peers, I'm going to be who I am. Do you know what I mean? I try to like hashtag read the room. You know what I mean? But we want to break out of these ideas that we aren't deserving of love and compassion, because it can be self-destructive and it can contribute to all kinds of things like low self-esteem, right? Not feeling like we're enough. For some people, it can cause or it contribute, that's a better way to say, contribute to anxiety or depression or choosing partners or friendships or relationships or jobs or gigs that are just not in alignment. And so it's not helpful to do the self-abandoning thing anymore. So let's talk about some of the ways that we can stop doing this. And I'm going to make these pretty brief, right? But we start by starting to have a better relationship with ourselves. And when I think about what a relationship really needs, it needs trust, right? It needs trust. It needs love. It needs compassion and kindness. There needs to be room to grow. There needs to be room to make mistakes, right? All the things that we might naturally extend to other people, the freedom to express yourself, the freedom to be who you are. You got to start showing up for yourself. And it's like, how do I do that? Like one day at a time, man. Like pick one thing. It might be you start to pay attention to how you talk to yourself and you're like, wow, I'm really harsh towards myself. I don't want to do that anymore, right? So you catch yourself. You allow yourself to have feelings and you allow yourself to have needs. It's not selfish. It's not selfish for you to have feelings and needs. It doesn't mean the whole world has to stop and fulfill those needs, that they now become like, oh, well, let me wait on you hand and foot, right? No, it's like everything with balance, everything with reason. Like, be a reasonable adult and think about this. But you want to listen to your feelings. You want to acknowledge that you have them. And then you want to try to meet them in a healthier and happier way. All right. So just identify your feelings when they're happening throughout the day. Oh, I notice that I'm feeling sad. I'm feeling excited. I'm feeling anxious. Anxious is visiting me, as I like to say sometimes, right? Treat yourself with compassion. Oh my God. Please don't be so hard on yourself. Everybody deserves to be seen and heard, to be met with great care, to be met with, comfort when they're suffering. Just be kind to yourself. Do your best to do that. Don't judge or criticize yourself so much. I wrote these down for myself. We weren't taught a lot of times self-compassion. We were taught compassion for other people. We were sometimes taught compassion for animals, but we aren't weren't a lot of times taught compassion towards ourselves, except if you watched Mr. Rogers and if you watched Bob Ross, some of my heroes. So here's the thing: we want to be kind to ourselves and allow yourself to be who you are, flaws and all, as they say, warts and all. You get to be a full picture of a person. Not like your mistakes are not the total sum of you. So you get to be flawed, you get to make mistakes, you get to make amends, you get to apologize, you get to grow, and you get to be better, right? But don't be beating yourself up all the time. Okay, it's really important. So here's the thing. We got to be paying attention. Notice when we're struggling. Notice when we need help. Notice our feelings. Notice our bodily sensations. We got to stop numbing things out and sucking them up and stuffing them down, right? So start to notice these things. Be kind to yourself. Recognize that everybody suffers and you're one of them, right? So you get to be kind and extend the compassion that you would naturally extend towards others, also towards yourself. Okay. Learning how to have more self-love and self-trust. Here's one of the big ones: having healthy boundaries, not saying yes when you mean no, not doing things out of guilt and shame and blame, doing them because you really want to do them. So not showing up out of resentment. You're going to get there, you're going to do the thing you didn't want to do, and then you're going to resent it. And then you're going to be like, I abandoned my own self. I abandoned my own needs once again. And I know we can be afraid, especially if you've been a people pleaser for a wicked long time. We can be afraid to say no to people or to offend them, or we're afraid like, oh my God, if I do this, they're not going to love me anymore. So we become a little doormatty. We kind of let people like walk all over you a little bit. We don't want to do that. Other people's needs matter too, but they don't have to be more important than yours. We get to consider all paths. We get to say, like, yeah, I'm willing to do this, but not on Wednesday. I'm able to do it on Thursday. You don't have to keep abandoning yourself to make other people happy. And if other people are going to leave you or dump you or not want to be friends with you because you put some healthy boundaries in place, that's a really good red flag, because you start to realize, oh, it was only a good relationship for them when I kowtowed and did everything for them and allowed them to take advantage of me. And usually when you put a boundary in place with a person who has been benefiting from your lack of boundaries, they will not like it. And they'll be like, you've changed. You're, meh, meh, meh. Yep, I have changed because I'm having more self-love and self-trust and showing up for yourself, prioritizing your needs, not saying you just, make yourself number one and become incredibly selfish and arrogant and all that. I'm not saying that. Balance, people, nuance here. You know what I mean? Use your smarty pants brain, right? But can you comfort yourself? Can you take good care of yourself? Can you stop abandoning those younger parts of yourself, those parts that you've exiled, and give them a voice and give them a good listen? These are all of the little ways that we can stop abandoning ourselves. We don't want to pick up where people earlier in our life like left off, right? And maybe you had, your family again. Your father didn't show up when he was supposed to pick you up for visitations when you're in a divorced family or whatever. Maybe people let you down. Maybe again, we get conditioned at a young age, but this is such an important thing. I've always kind of loved this little quote: become the adult that you needed when you were a child, and self-parent. This is about reparenting yourself and really learning that you matter, what you feel matter, what you think matters, your experience matters. And we want to stop abandoning ourselves. Like I always say, like foundlings, like let's re-find ourselves and let's take extra good care of ourselves going back to the beginning, right? I have a soft spot in my heart for foundlings who, get found first of all, and then are taking good care and go on to lead beautiful lives. So it's not too late for us. I always say, if I'm above ground and I'm still conscious and I'm still breathing, there is an opportunity for me to grow and change and get better at loving myself and loving others and loving the animals and stuff. So don't give up on us yet, guys. We're still in the fight. We're still in the race. So I hope this was helpful to you in some way. I hope you have a fantastic rest of your day. Thank you for listening. And you guys, I have so many cool things going on right now. I'm doing a 3-part series of, it's called Podcast Summer School. I'm doing it with Emily Aborn. It's happening in Concord at the 11th letter. We're doing a workshop in June, July, and August, all about starting a podcast. And then the next one is about growing your podcast. And the next one is about, do you want to be a better podcast guest and host? I'm wicked excited. And of course, we have Write Club coming back also in June. It's Saturday, June, I think it's the 27th from 1 to 4 p.m. That's also happening at the 11th Letter Writing Gallery in Concord. But if you want to find out about all these things and get the podcast sent to you directly into your inbox every Thursday morning, then you just go online to karenkenney.com/sign up, one word, and you can get on my list and find out when all the shenanigans are happening. All the events you can find pretty much online. The podcast summer series, if you want that direct link to sign up, just shoot me an email or go to the contact page on my website, karenkenney.com/contact. You'll find it all. I'm really easy to find. Shoot me a message, send me a DM online, and I will get you the link or links. All right. Thank you so much for tuning in. Wherever you go, may you leave the animals and yourself and the people around you and the planet and the environment better than how you found it. Wherever you go, may your energy, your love, your presence, and your good care towards yourself. You're no longer abandoning yourself. That energy you show up with when you are acting in that way, in a loving way towards yourself. May all of that be a blessing. Bye.